They fined me $900 for mowing my lawn without authorization and gave me 72 hours to pay before they'd initiate lien review. That phrase hit like a trigger, because they didn't know the man they threatened once signed their county's criminal summonses. Welcome to my channel. I'm Mark Hollis, former assistant district attorney, now a homeowner in Henderson County, North Carolina, trying to live a quiet life with my daughter after losing my wife 2 years ago. If you like stories where the rulebook finally turns on its authors, stick around and tell me where you're watching from. It started with a patch of grass. I was fixing the irrigation lines behind my fence the morning after a thunderstorm when a board member named Janice pulled up in her golf cart like she owned the street. She said, "Our landscaping contractor reports an unsanctioned alteration to the uniform turf texture." I thought she was joking, but she slipped a bright orange notice under my wiper, "Fine already printed, no conversation." I watched it flap there in the wind while my daughter's bus turned the corner. At first, I tried to laugh it off. Everyone in Cedar Ridge Estates complained about the HOA, but no one fought it. They wielded their CCRs like sacred scripture, quoting line 12.3 about visual harmony. Still, I paid the first $150 citation out of sheer exhaustion. The second arrived 3 days later for improper tool storage. Apparently, my mower's handle was visible from the street for 27 minutes, according to a time-stamped photo. I'd spent 12 years prosecuting fraud, racketeering, and property crimes, so I knew patterns of abuse when I saw them. This wasn't about aesthetics, it was about control. And in communities like ours, control was currency. That night, sitting under the porch light with coffee gone cold, I found the envelope from the HOA stuffed with glossy minute. So on page 3, a vote had passed to allow selective enforcement authority for rapid response board actions. No quorum listed, no attorney signature. That's when I felt the old courtroom pulse return to my chest. I called my neighbor Tom Rivas, retired city planner, the one guy who never attended meetings because, as he put it, "I can't survive that level of hypocrisy." He listened quietly while I read the fine aloud. "They're overstepping delegated authority," he said. "You still got your prosecutor reflex?" "I'm trying not to," I said. But it was too late. The reflex was awake. The next morning, I began a notebook. Evidence log 001. Photos, dates, code sections. I pulled their recorded declaration from the county clerk's archive. Document number 2004-56718. 26 pages. Last amended, 2011. What I found on page 19 made me sit back. The landscaping covenant applied only to common maintained lawns under HOA contract. Mine, per plat map, was independently deeded maintenance. Knowledge. Nugget number 1. In most states, an HOA can't enforce covenants on property not explicitly listed as common maintenance or architectural control in its recorded declaration, no matter what their handbook claims. So my yard wasn't their jurisdiction. Still, they billed me as if it were. 3 days later, Janice returned, this time with another board member, a wiry man named Clay who wore mirrored sunglasses even at dusk. "Mark," he said, "we'd prefer cooperation over escalation." His voice had the tone of someone who just discovered the phrase quasi-governmental. I kept my calm, asked to see the specific clause granting their right to approve lawn equipment. He pointed to a laminated cheat sheet. Article 8, Uniform Aesthetic Standards. I asked where it was recorded. He blinked. "We have it in our binder." That night I dug deeper. County assessor files, parcel maps, recorded easements. My wife used to joke that I was incapable of sleeping without cross-referencing something. She wasn't wrong. At 2:47 a.m., I found a chain of title document showing my property's original tract was excluded from the HOA annexation in 2005, pending owner consent. That consent had never been filed. I called the county recorder the next morning. "So, if no consent was ever recorded, technically, I'm not subject to the CCRs?" "That's correct," she said. "You're what we call an orphan parcel. They can't levy assessments or fines on you legally." I almost laughed. The DA's office had a term for this kind of overreach, constructive fraud. But I kept quiet. If I'd learned anything from trials, it's that timing beats outrage every time. The next HOA letter raised the stakes. Final notice of escalation, dated May 12th, citing refusal to remedy violations. They threatened lien initiation. I folded it neatly, slid it into my binder labeled evidence, and wrote in the margin, "Let them file it." By then, Tom had started helping me gather signatures from neighbors quietly fed up with violation farming. The stories poured out. Elderly residents fined for bird feeders, veterans cited for flag placement, families warned about chalk drawings on sidewalks. I recorded each one, notarized affidavits, time-stamped photos. Late one night, I caught myself scrolling old photos of my wife on this same lawn, barefoot, laughing under the maple she planted the first spring we moved in. She'd fought cancer through rain and sun, never missed mowing day, said the sound of that mower was her meditation. The HOA's letters felt like desecration. I closed the photo album and whispered, "This one's for you." Because in Henderson County, they may run an HOA like a monarchy, but I still remembered how to file an ING, unction. 2 days later, I parked across from the HOA office, a rented storefront beside a nail salon. Through the glass, I could see the president, Janice, pacing with a clipboard while Clay scrolled through his phone. I walked in with a folder thick enough to sound like law when it hit the counter. "Afternoon," I said. "I'm here to request the full list of board-approved fines for the past 12 months under Para 47F3107 of the State Community Association Statute, Transparency Requirement." Janice's smile thinned. "We don't disclose internal enforcement records." "Actually," I said, flipping to a page, "you do, unless you've amended your bylaws without notice, which would be another violation." Clay leaned in, trying intimidation. "You threatening us, Mr. Hollis?" "No," I said evenly. "I'm informing you. Difference is, mine's lawful." They wouldn't hand it over, of course, but the refusal itself was a record. I filed it under Exhibit B, non-compliance. That night, over dinner, my daughter asked, "Why are you mad at the grass people, Dad?" I told her the truth, simplified, because sometimes grown-ups forget rules are supposed to protect everyone, not just themselves. She nodded, then drew a little scale of justice in her notebook, the kind that tips toward the bigger person first, until someone sets it straight. Next morning, I drafted an open records request to the County Department of Insurance. Most HOAs in our state carry fidelity and director's liability policies. Those carriers don't like exposure. If the board was finding outside scope, that was exposure. A week later, a reply came. Policy number DLA 9841, coverage through Maple River Mutual. The irony wasn't lost on me. Maple River had been a cooperating witness in a fraud case I'd prosecuted 5 years earlier. When you've built cases, you learn the rhythm of bad governance. Power complacency, sloppiness Paul. Nick. They were already at stage 3. By early June, neighbors began forwarding me fresh nonsense. $50 fines for unapproved holiday decor. $75 for temporary vehicle on driveway overnight. I told them to log everything. Patterns win investigations, not emotions. Then came the quote that flipped the switch for me. During a board meeting, recorded, lawfully, North Carolina's one-party consent, Janice said, "If we don't keep them afraid, they'll stop paying." That single line captured their business model. Manufactured fear. Mid-story pause. Quick word to you watching. Are you firmly anti-HOA, or have you ever faced one that forgot it's not a kingdom? If so, drop your tactic in the comments. How did you stand up? And if you're still living under one, leave your message for them here. That same week, I visited Tom's garage. His drafting table was covered in aerial prints of our subdivision. He'd layered transparencies showing the phases built from 2003 to 2011, each with annexation stamps. "Look," he said, tapping a parcel outline. Phase 4 was never formally adopted into the association. County approved it as maintenance optional. That's you, buddy. I traced the line with my finger, remembering the night I'd signed the purchase papers 10 years ago. The developer's rep had promised lifetime landscaping service, which I declined in writing. That declination form, if I could find it, was my firewall. Tom and I spent the next few nights combing through old banker boxes. Between a tax return and a faded sympathy card from my wife's memorial, I found it. A single-page opt-out dated April 18, 2015, notarized. I almost didn't notice the developer's stamp in the corner, an LLC name I recognized. Maple River Development LLC, same Maple River as the insurance carrier. A loop. The next morning, I called an old colleague, Denise Tran, now a real estate attorney with a laugh like gravel rolling in a cup. Mark Hollis, disappearing from prosecution only to prosecute your own HOA, she said. I told her about the chain of title, the opt-out, the carrier overlap. Could be a conflict of interest under their fiduciary duty, she said. If the same corporate entity developed the property and still profits through the HOA's insurer, that's textbook self-dealing. Knowledge nugget number 2 would eventually come from that insight, but for now, we needed paper. Denise filed a certified demand for records on my behalf under Par 47F 1 under AT. Predictably, they ignored it. So we escalated. I timed their violations like clockwork. Every 10 days, a new notice. By mid-June, I'd accumulated $2,375 in bogus fines, enough to file a declaratory action. But I didn't rush. Better to let them hang themselves with one last letter. It arrived June 28th, certified mail. Notice of intent to record lien. They even attached a mock form. The problem? Liens in this county require a pre-lien hearing and majority vote, neither of which they'd done. That was procedural suicide. That night, I lit the grill out back, dropped that letter into the coals, and watched the orange paper curl into ash. The smoke rose like punctuation on a promise. Tom leaned on the fence. "You're going to burn the whole HOA down, aren't you?" "Just the rotten parts," I said. "The rest can rebuild." He grinned. "You're smiling again. That's how I know it's getting dangerous." And he wasn't wrong. Because by July, I wasn't just defending my lawn. I was building a case file that could end a board. By early July, the smell of cut grass had turned from comfort to defiance. Every stripe I mowed felt like a legal argument. The board doubled down. Letters, fines, even a so-called compliance check, where Clay stood on my property taking pictures of my air conditioner. I called out through the window, "You're trespassing, Clay." He muttered, "See." Something about inspection authority, then tripped over a sprinkler head on his way out. I logged the time, 9:14 a.m., and added it to the record. That same afternoon, Denise emailed. They filed their lien notice without a recorded covenant authority. That's fraud under Par 14 to 109. She attached a PDF stamped with the county seal. I felt the world tighten into focus. Tom stopped by later with a new map overlay he'd made. "See this drainage easement?" he said, tracing a blue line through our subdivision. "It's a public utility easement, meaning the HOA can't obstruct or restrict access." That caught my attention, because 3 months ago, the board had fenced off that very easement and added private property, HOA access-only signs. If that was indeed a public easement, they'd just violated their own deed restrictions and county code. Knowledge nugget number 1, continued from the field. When an HOA fences off or restricts a recorded public utility or drainage easement, it's trespass on public right-of-way and potentially a zoning violation, punishable by fines or forced removal. We were close to something much bigger than my lawn. Denise and I set up a call with the county zoning officer, a man named Perry, who sounded perpetually tired. "If that easement's obstructed," he said, "they'll have to remove it within 30 days after notice. Want me to send an inspector?" "Yes," I said, "but quietly. I want them unaware until they're on the clock." 3 days later, Perry texted a photo. County-issued orange tag stapled to the fence. Notice of unauthorized obstruction. Code 07208. The timestamp read 10:31 a.m. That was my silent victory dance. That evening, while rain hissed on the driveway, I sat at the table with Denise's documents spread like a battlefield. She'd drawn red lines between every conflict of interest: developer, insurer, board enforcement revenue. "They're cycling money through their own insurance pool," she said. "Kickbacks disguised as claims mitigation." I exhaled slowly. "So they fine us, claim in, increased risk to the insurer, get rebates for active management, and the insurer is them." Exactly. Classic closed loop. We both knew what that meant. Reversal number 1 was forming in the shadows. But I wasn't there yet. I still needed to secure something concrete, something I could pull out at the set piece and flip the entire game. Denise proposed an idea so audacious it made me grin. Buy the note. She explained. When developers exit, they often sell the common area mortgage or maintenance bond to a trust. If we could trace that chain, we might find a note holder willing to assign it, for cheap. Whoever holds that note technically controls certain liens and insurance claims. Let me guess, I said. You know a guy. She laughed. You know I do. That night, I stared at the old family photo on the mantel, my wife in the same orange shirt she used to garden in. I'm doing it, I whispered. You told me to stand up for home. But the HOA wasn't done playing bully. The next morning, an officer knocked on my door for a wellness check. Someone had called claiming suspicious activity. I saw Clay watching from his truck down the street. The officer apologized when he realized the setup. Sir, this happens more than you'd think, he said. Document everything. So I did. Photos, badge numbers, the false report reference code. Evidence log 037. By mid-month, the community had split into quiet factions. Some residents avoided eye contact, afraid of retaliation. Others began dropping envelopes in my mailbox with copies of their own fines. One was from a widowed teacher fined $125 for excessive porch decor, 3 pumpkins, and a small flag. Late that night, I typed an email to Maple River Mutual's compliance desk. Potential self-dealing and bad faith exposure by insured HOA. Attached, evidence summary, 25 pages. Requesting investigation under policy DLA 9841. Tom drop, and by the next day with coffee and a smirk. You just tossed a lit match into their insurance file. Good, I said. Let's see who catches fire first. Before closing my laptop that night, I scrolled through a local news page. Someone had posted a comment thread about rogue HOAs. Dozens of homeowners venting stories just like ours. I thought about the viewers who'd find this channel later and feel seen. Let me throw this question to you since we're knee-deep together now. How far should an HOA's control go over your porch, your yard, your tools? Where's the line between community standards and personal freedom? Tell me where you draw it, or at least like the video if you're drawing that line right here. The following morning, Perry's inspection report landed in my inbox. The fence removal order had been issued. The HOA now faced a $500 per day penalty starting July 20th. I forwarded it to Denise with one word. Boom. But I didn't celebrate long. That night, a rock hit my mailbox, denting the side. No note, just the noise in the dark. I fixed it in silence, metal cold in my hands. I could feel their fear turning feral. Tom called from his porch. They're scared, Mark. That's good. Scared people make mistakes. He was right. And the mistake came faster than expected. The HOA scheduled an emergency board session for July 25th. Topic: Property compliance irregularities. They didn't know I had already bought something they desperately needed to control, the bond assignment transferring oversight of the drainage easement to a new entity. Mine. I smiled when the notarized envelope arrived that Friday. The leverage was real, signed, and filed. And I hadn't even shown them the page they forgot exists. The envelope was heavier than it should have been. Paper and ink, sure, but also power. Inside was the official assignment of rights for the Maple River Drainage Easement Bond, dated July 19, 2023, notarized by the same county clerk the HOA thought ignored me. I'd paid $20,800 through a quiet LLC Denise helped me form, Henderson Equity Holdings. And with that transaction, I now controlled every compliance claim tied to that easement. If they wanted to enforce anything, they'd have to ask me for permission. That was the secret leverage. I told no one except Denise and Tom. They can't touch that property line without your consent now, Denise said, adjusting her glasses, her nails tapping against the ceramic mug. Legally, you own the sword they've been waving. Then I'll sheath it, I said, until the perfect moment. HOA politics runs on gossip, so it didn't take long before rumors twisted the air like humidity before a storm. Clay started parking his truck outside my driveway again, pretending to check his phone. Janice sent me a letter, no signature, just typed words, accusing me of interfering with community governance. I could have laughed, but instead I documented. Each contact, each letter, each trespass went into my file. The harassment ramped up. 4 citations in 10 days. Mailbox non-conforming color, $75. Unauthorized lawn service activity, $200. Improper waste bin visibility, $50. Failure to remove vehicle fluids from driveway, $100. They were trying to exhaust me. So I changed tactics. I stopped reacting. No emails, no calls, no acknowledgement. Silence. The one thing tyrants can't manipulate. Instead, I focused on preparing the set piece. We scheduled a community special meeting for August 10th, requested by petition of 28 homeowners, more than the 25% threshold required by statute. The topic? Vote of no confidence in the current HOA board. The board tried to block it, of course, but the law was clear. Denise made sure every comma matched statute language. Meanwhile, I built a presentation that would detonate politely. Records, emails, deeds, inspection orders, and the bomb, my assignment of rights. Late one evening, as I printed the last exhibit, my dog, Peter, wandered in wearing her pajamas. "Is this about the grass again?" she asked. "It started that way," I said, "but now it's about everyone's grass." She looked serious, like she'd inherited her mother's focus. "Mom used to say people don't care about laws until they protect them." She was right, I said softly, and she'd like what's coming. In the final week before the meeting, the board went into full panic. They issued a community bulletin accusing certain residents of spreading misinformation. They cited defamation, threatened civil action. Tom laughed when he saw it. "They're bluffing," he said. "Yeah," I replied, "and I indict." But something deeper stirred that week. A current of fear mixed with solidarity. Neighbors began nodding at me in the street again. Someone left coffee and donuts on my porch with a note. "We're with you." Even Perry, the zoning officer, called. "Your HOA called us trying to retract the inspection order," he said, chuckling. "Can't do that. It's public record now." I thanked him and hung up, smiling at the absurdity. The dominoes were aligning. Then Denise dropped the next gift. Their DO insurer opened an investigation. They're requesting minutes, conflict disclosures, and financial statements. That's a full audit trigger, Mark. "Perfect," I said. "They'll be too busy covering tracks to realize I'm setting the stage." The day before the meeting, Clay showed up on my porch unannounced, hands in pockets. "You think you're some kind of hero?" he said. "I think I'm a homeowner who reads," I replied. "You're ruining this place." "No," I said. "You did that when you forgot who owns it." He stared for a long second, then turned and left without another word. That night, the sky opened up, summer thunder rolling across the ridge. I stood under the porch, watching the rain hit the pavement, thinking of the day my wife planted that maple. I felt calm, steady, ready. Before we move into what's next, I want to hear from you. When it comes to HOA rules, should power stay, centralized for efficiency, or should every homeowner have direct vote access on fines and budgets? Drop your thoughts below. This debate's been burning for years. The morning of August 10th arrived clear and humid. The community hall buzzed with tension. Folding chairs scraped the floor, murmurs filled the air, and at the front stood the board, flanked by a uniformed county sheriff for security. Janice began, voice trembling under a practiced smile. "We're here to address a coordinated campaign of hostility against this association." I waited until she finished reading her scripted outrage. Then I rose, walked to the front, and laid my binder on the table with a sound like a gavel strike. "Madam President," I said calmly, "I move to suspend your enforcement authority pending review of conflict of interest violations." The room went silent except for the air conditioner hum. She scoffed. "You can't just—" I slid the notarized assignment across the table. "Actually, I can, because as of July 19th, I control the bond governing the easement your board built on illegally. Every citation tied to that land is null and void, and any further enforcement without consent constitutes fraud." The sheriff leaned in, reading the document. His brow lifted. "This is legitimate," he said. "County recorded and sealed." Janice's face drained of color. And that was when the real domino fall began. Janice's lips trembled as the sheriff's thumb brushed over the notary seal. Around us, the air thickened. Chairs creaked. Whispers rose like static. Clay stepped forward, his voice brittle. "That's not possible. The HOA owns all communal— Correction, I said, flipping to page 2. Owned, until the original bondholder transferred oversight to a third party. Me. I tapped the page. Filed July 19th, Book 1217, page 84. County record doesn't lie. The sheriff straightened, arms crossed. He's right. That's a lawful assignment. For the first time, Janice looked small. You can't just ambush us like this. I leaned closer. You ambushed half this neighborhood for years. Consider this balance. Then I stepped back and let the silence do what words couldn't. When Denise rose next, her presence filled the room. My client isn't here to embarrass anyone, she said, voice steady but razor-edged. He's here to restore lawful governance, and since this board ignored multiple statutory notices, we're filing a declaratory petition by end of week to suspend the association's enforcement authority pending audit. Gasps scattered like dominoes. Tom, sitting 3 rows back, gave a low whistle. That's what happens when you build castles on clay, he muttered. Afterward, people surrounded us, neighbors who'd been silent for years. Some hugged me, others whispered stories about fines and threats. I kept repeating the same line. Stay calm. Follow procedure. We're winning because we stayed lawful. By the next morning it began, the retaliation montage. The board issued emergency fines for anyone attending the meeting. Disruptive conduct, $150 each. A flyer went up at the mail kiosk labeling me a disgruntled former official. Someone even created a fake Facebook page using my name, posting rants about destroying community unity. I didn't bite. Instead, I called the county sheriff's office to report the identity theft and harassment. The deputy nodded, taking notes. You'd be surprised how often HOA disputes turn criminal, he said. Keep your paperwork tight. Always do, I replied. Every evening that week, I documented the new citations, date-stamped, photographed, stored in digital and paper folders. I printed duplicates and sealed them in a fireproof box under my workbench. Then came the lowest point. A COA enforcement truck pulled up outside one afternoon while I was at work. My daughter was home with a friend. They called me whispering, "Dad, there's a man taking pictures of the house." I drove faster than I should have. When I arrived, the inspector looked nervous. "Sir, I was sent by the HOA for a safety inspection." "You don't have jurisdiction here," I said, forcing calm. "Who authorized it?" He checked his tablet. "President Janice Wilburn." I handed him my deed copy. "You're on a non-annexed parcel. Leave now." He did, apologizing. My daughter watched from the porch, tears drying on her cheeks. That night, I tucked her in and promised, "No one will bother us again after this month." She asked, "Are they going to jail?" "Maybe not jail," I said, "but they'll learn the rules they broke." After she fell asleep, I sat outside under the maple tree listening to cicadas. The fear had shifted into resolve. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about a community gaslighted into silence. Let's pause right here, viewer to viewer. What should the consequence be for HOA board members who weaponize their authority? Civil fines, removal, or full criminal charges? Drop your sense of justice below. I'm curious where you'd draw the punishment line. The next morning, Denise called. "We've got it," she said. "The insurer's internal audit confirms undeclared conflicts. They froze the HOA's claim account pending investigation." I nearly dropped my coffee. Meaning they can't spend a dime on enforcement or legal defense without insurer approval. I looked at the sunrise stretching across my yard. The same yard they said violated visual harmony. I couldn't help but smile. 2 days later, an unmarked sedan rolled up. A man stepped out wearing a navy windbreaker. County Inspector, Office of Regulatory Affairs. "We received notice of multiple procedural irregularity," as he said, flashing credentials. "Mind if I review your documentation?" I handed him the binder. He flipped through, nodding. "You kept excellent records, Mr. Hollis. We'll need copies for the county file. You may have saved your neighbors months of hearings." When he left, Tom appeared from across the street with his thermos. "So what's next?" "Next," I said, closing the binder with a snap, "we turn leverage into reform." He grinned. "You always did prefer a clean ending." I didn't tell him what was already in motion. Denise drafting a reform charter with specific terms. Term limits, open voting, audit rights, and a rollback of enforcement fees. But before that could be offered, the board needed to collapse under its own weight, because only broken structures agree to rebuild. The collapse started quietly, like a hairline crack in a windshield spreading faster than anyone can stop it. The HOA board tried to hold an emergency session to reassert authority, but without insurance coverage, their counsel withdrew that morning. The email leaked within hours. Denise forwarded it to me. Subject line, "Your storm has landed." That night, I sat at the kitchen table under the hum of the old ceiling fan, aligning every piece of paper by its corner. The binder was ready, exhibits A through N, each tagged, indexed, notarized. On the first page, I taped a small photo of my wife and daughter sitting on the grass, the maple tree behind them. Visual beat number 1, proof of why I started. Denise called around 9. "Tomorrow's the open meeting," she said. "They'll try to make you out as a provocateur. Stay precise. Stay calm." I smiled into the receiver. "You ever see me lose control in court?" She laughed. "Once. Over stale coffee. Don't let them be your second." The next morning, the hall filled again. Standing room only this time. Half the crowd held folded copies of the audit notice. Janice entered last, flanked by Clay and 2 nervous board members. Their eyes darted between cameras and reporters. I took my seat near the front, Denise beside me, Tom leaning against the back wall, arms crossed. The meeting opened with Janice reading from a pre-written statement about baseless accusations. She used words like slanderous, defamatory, un-American. But halfway through, the county inspector I'd met earlier stepped forward, holding his clipboard. "Before you continue," he said, "the county has verified multiple procedural breaches under zoning code and community association statute. This meeting's actions are therefore advisory only until review concludes." The murmur was instant. Flashbulbs popped. I stood slowly, heart steady. "Madam President," I said, voice measured, "as holder of the Maple River Oversight Bond and on behalf of 63 homeowners, I move that enforcement authority be suspended pending reform negotiations." Janice's mouth tightened. "You're not recognized." The inspector looked up. "He's recognized under statute 47F3-1008C. Motion carries with majority vote." Hands rose around the room like a tide, neighbor after neighbor, more than half. That was reversal number 1 in action. Clay slammed his folder shut. "You think this makes you some kind of hero?" "No," I said, "just accountable," which is what this board should have been. As the sheriff confirmed the vote tally, Denise stepped forward and announced the next step, temporary receivership and an independent audit. The flash of her silver pen glinted under the fluorescent lights, a symbolic gavel stroke. Then came the sound that marked the turning point. Applause. Hesitant at first, then unanimous. Visual beat number 2 locked in, rain streaking against the hall windows, microphone dripping from condensation as the inspector read the county order aloud. When it was over, the board walked out through the side door, silent. Outside, the air smelled like wet pavement and cut grass. Tom joined me at the steps. "They'll resign by tomorrow," he said. "They'll fight first," I replied. He smirked. "So you plan for both?" Knowledge nugget number 2. Under most state statutes, once an HOA loses insurer coverage or faces verified conflict of interest findings, the county or a neutral receiver can suspend its enforcement authority pending reformation, preventing any new fines, liens, or legal actions. That night, I didn't sleep much. Every sound outside felt like possibility. Around 3 a.m., I sat at my desk and opened a blank document titled Charter Reform Proposal. Denise and I had outlined it earlier. Term limits, open budgeting, fee rollback, independent ethics committee, and quarterly transparency reports. By dawn, I finished drafting what would become the backbone of reversal number 2. Before sending it, I looked again at that photo taped inside my binder. My wife's hand in the grass, her smile unafraid of the dirt. She'd believed in fairness more than victory. When the morning light hit the window, I realized the war was nearly over. What remained was to trade leverage for change, the kind that outlives any one fight. Quick pause while the dust settles. If you've been through a similar battle, what's your playbook? Do you buy leverage quietly, or do you go straight to court and let it burn? I want to hear how you'd handle it. Because tomorrow, Leverage becomes reform. Morning came thick with humidity and the faint smell of wet cedar. My phone buzzed before sunrise. Tom again. "Turn on Channel 5, he said. The local news anchor stood in front of our subdivision sign, voice brisk. Cedar Ridge HOA faces suspension following county audit findings. Allegations include misuse of insurance funds, unlawful fines, and obstruction of public easement. Behind her, the orange inspection tag fluttered on the fence like a flag of surrender. By noon, Janice's resignation email hit every inbox in the neighborhood. 2 sentences, no apology. Clay followed an hour later, blaming personal stress. The remaining board members called an emergency vote to appoint an interim president. They didn't realize their bylaws required county approval for that now. Dominoes, all falling the same way. Denise came over that afternoon carrying a thermos of coffee and the final draft of the reform charter. "It's time," she said. We spread the papers across the same table that once held my violation notices. The smell of printer toner and rain-soaked envelopes felt like poetry. Knowledge nugget number 3. Under State Administrative Code, a suspended HOA can reinstate authority only after adopting compliance reforms ratified by a 2/3 homeowner vote and validated by a neutral authority, typically the county registrar or ombuds. That was our target. We scheduled a community assembly for August 22nd at the Recreation Hall. This time, no intimidation, no sheriffs, just residents. The chairs were arranged in a circle, open floor. I stood and read the preamble of the proposed charter, to restore transparency, accountability, and fairness to the governance of Cedar Ridge Estates. Tom followed, his voice carrying steady conviction. No more secret meeting. GS, no more fabricated fines, no more fear of walking across your own yard. People clapped, some cried. We passed the petition sheet around, pens scratching like rainfall. By the end of the night, 71 signatures. Enough for ratification. As Denise notarized the final page, a local reporter approached with a small camera. "Mr. Hollis, any comment on what this means for the community?" I looked past the lens to where my daughter sat sketching that maple tree again. "It means we remember the difference between rules and rights," I said, "and that's all any neighborhood needs." The next day, the county inspector, our neutral authority, returned to certify the reform vote. Rain streaked the hall windows again, echoing the day of the showdown. He shook my hand. "You've set a precedent, Mr. Hollis. First HOA in this county to voluntarily reform under community petition." Tom slapped my back. "Congratulations, Mr. District Attorney." I smiled. "Retired, Tom." "Not today," he said. Before heading home, I walked the path behind our houses where the illegal fence had stood. The posts were gone, soil damp and clean. The easement flowed clear again, a small stream trickling like punctuation. Now, before we close this story's final chapter, I want to throw one last question your way. When it comes to accountability, should local governments enforce HOA transparency laws, or should homeowners have to police them through civil action? Let me know what kind of system you'd trust to keep power honest. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the ridge, my daughter joined me on the porch. "It's quieter now," she said. "Yeah," I replied. "That's what truth sounds like." We sat there, the cicadas starting up, her hand tucked in mine. For the first time in months, I didn't flinch at footsteps or mail trucks. But I wasn't done yet. The reform deal had to be signed, sealed, and filed. And somewhere, deep down, I knew Janice and Clay wouldn't leave Q. Yetly, there's always one last flicker before the fire dies. So I waited, patient and ready, pen in pocket, reform document on the desk, knowing tomorrow would test if our win could stand. I woke to another humid dawn, the kind that smells like wet concrete and change. On the kitchen table sat the reform charter, still unsigned. My phone buzzed. A county number. The inspector again. "Mr. Hollis, we need you at the hall at 9. They've sent a counter-proposal." I expected that. Janice and Clay weren't the surrendering type. At the hall I found them waiting, flanked by a new attorney in a gray suit who looked barely 30. "We'll sign the reforms," he said, "if you agree to drop all pending complaints and withdraw the audit press coverage." I studied him for a moment. "You want silence in exchange for compliance?" He hesitated. "That's one way to phrase it." Denise stepped beside me, calm and surgical. "Our offer stands," she said. "You adopt the reforms publicly. We'll advocate leniency on penalties. Transparency or nothing." Janice's eyes flickered between us. "You're destroying what we built." "No," I said quietly. "I'm saving what's left." She looked away, shoulders slumping. Clay rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Fine, you win." "No," I said again. "The community wins." We signed the document in triplicate. The inspector stamped it with the county seal, each thunk of his press a note of finality. That was reversal number 2 complete. Leverage traded for reform, not revenge. When the reporters returned that afternoon, I didn't give speeches. I just handed them the signed charter. "This isn't a feud," I told them. "It's a reset." Knowledge nugget number 4. The most lasting HOA reforms happen through consent decrees and recorded amendments, not courtroom fireworks. Once filed with the county, those changes bind future boards, an accountability architecture that outlives personalities. 2 weeks later, the headline softened. Cedar Ridge HOA adopts transparency charter after audit. The insurer reinstated coverage with new oversight clauses. The fines vanished from every homeowner's ledger, and the first open budget session was scheduled for September 5th, public, filmed, mandatory attendance for board members. That night, I hosted a cookout on the same lawn where it all began. Neighbors brought folding chairs, kids played tag under porch lights. Tom toasted with his thermos raised. To the man who mowed his way into county history. Laughter rippled through the crowd. My daughter handed me a sheet of paper, a drawing of the maple tree, roots spreading deep, branches wide. She'd written one line beneath it. "Home means safe again." I taped it inside my binder as the last exhibit. Before we close this story, if you believe I fought the right way and that communities should always choose sunlight over secrecy, say a few words in the comments for your friend who's been fighting their own small war at home. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and share this story so others learn their rights. That part's on us. As for what changed after, the county announced a pilot program to audit all HOA charters annually. Maple River Mutual replaced 2 executives for conflict of interest. Janice was fined $4,000 for filing false reports. Clay accepted a year's probation for harassment. And Cedar Ridge Estates, once infamous for its fines, now hosts a yearly Neighbors' Day, free BBQ, open ledgers, and an award for the cleanest lawn. I still mow every Saturday morning, engine hum steady as a heartbeat. When the blades start cutting, I think about law and grass and the strange way both grow back stronger after being cut down. The maple tree is taller now, its shadow reaching across the whole yard. Sometimes, when the sun hits just right, I see my wife's outline in the branches, smiling, content, proud. And every time I put the mower away, I whisper the same promise that started it all: never again. Then I lock the shed, close the binder, and look toward the next house that might need defending.